You are listening to Salty Believer Unscripted.
This is Salty Believer Unscripted. I'm Josiah Walker.
I'm Bryan Catherman.
And today we're continuing our series, What is Systematic Theology 2.0, now entitled Landmines of Systematic Theology.
I was going to say, wait, didn't we change the title?
And I think where we're picking up now is what is creation, or what are the landmines in creation?
There's no controversy in this field whatsoever.
I got like 3 pages of questions.
Dude, okay, so you came prepared. I'll just ask, can I ask you one?
Okay.
I don't. What's up with the dinosaurs?
Ooh, that was not on my list.
So I'm asking you.
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs? Yes, no. Oh, let me. No. Let me rephrase it. Dinosaurs on the ark?
No. You gotta break this up into multiple questions. First, dinosaurs, yes or no?
Oh, okay. Dinosaurs, yes or no? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's dinosaurs.
But some people say no.
Okay.
Dude, no.
No.
When I was in school, I had this roommate. So I went to a public school. I wasn't working on seminary, Bible college, something like that. I had a guy in the dorms. He actually wasn't my roommate. He was on our floor though, and he honestly would say it all the time. Now bear in mind, I was not a Christian.
Sure.
So this just sounded like the craziest thing you could imagine. He told me one time that the dinosaur bones were in the ground because the devil created the dinosaur bones to trick people.
Okay.
And here's what, as a non-Christian, here was my biggest issue. The devil has power to create things. I thought only God could create things.
Sure.
But anyway, that's what he believed.
I get where he's coming from.
No dinosaurs. It was just a work of the devil.
Well, let's say it was
that's
a
a
work of
landmine.
God. Let's assume it was a work of God.
To trick people?
Now.
Maybe? Okay. Back to your question. Okay,
were dinosaurs alive at the same time that man was alive? Or before man?
So, let's come back to that question. Let's get to the really big questions here.
Okay.
Because that's going to play into...
Sure.
Literal, figurative. Let's just list the landmines. Okay, literal, figurative views.
Right. So was it a literal 7 days that God created?
24-hour day versus like
periods of time,
eons of time. I hold, and our listeners may disagree. That's fine, but I am gonna take the Bible on its face because I don't have any reason to say otherwise, unless I let the world help me interpret the Bible. But I'm going to say that, it's a 24-hour day. Now, if I looked out to the world and I said, let's let the world tell me how to understand and let the world help me interpret the Bible, that's going to be problematic on a lot of levels. I want to let the Bible help me understand the world.
And I think there are parts of the Bible that are figurative. We see some figurative language throughout Scripture, but I don't think that's in the creation account.
It is really tough not to take it on its word when it comes to other passages that would say they're inspired by God, that on the 7th day God rested.
Right.
I just think I'm okay to just take it for what it says.
So literal 24-hour day.
Yeah,
literal 7 days.
Literal 24-hour day, literal 7 days, which then that takes us to the gap theory.
So,
Tell us about the gap theory.
So, I don't know if I can explain it the best, but supposedly there's a theory that after God created the earth, but before man, there was a huge gap.
Right, so then, all the dinosaurs lived in there, which I have to look at my Bible. Don't the living creatures get made on the same day that man gets made?
I thought so. Eve comes later.
Yeah, hold on, let me just pull it up. So, anyway, the gap theory is a whole bunch of time passed. That's where the dinosaurs would have been. You're just checking off your questions with
So are you a gap theory guy?
No.
You think there's this large gap?
Definitely not. Before man was created, I'm just looking really fast to see. Let's see. Then the lights. I'm going through this really rapidly. Okay, so then God said, let's see, what day is this? So the 5th, so evening and morning came on the 5th day. So it's the 6th day, starting in verse 24.
Yeah.
Then God said, birds were created on the 5th day.
So
and
the dinosaur birds.
We got birds and fish, and then verse 24. Then God said, "Let the earth produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that crawl, and the wildlife of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And this is the same day that God is going to create man in His own image.
Right.
Let us create God in our image. So
127.
The gap theory, if you're trying to cover dinosaurs, that's tricky because that says it's on the same day, and if it's even huge eons of time, I don't know. I just am okay to say literal 7 days, 24-hour days.
I think dinosaurs and man coexisted.
So I struggled. I believe that dinosaurs and man coexisted, and people go, "Oh, these guys are idiots." Well, okay, whatever. But I remember going to the Ark encounter.
Oh yeah.
And I remember going, "Wait a minute, I'd never really thought if dinosaurs and man coexisted, and God saved all the animals on the ark, then the dinosaurs would have been on the ark, and people say, how is that possible? And those answers to Genesis guys have tons of answers. I don't know. Sure. It was pretty convincing, though.
So that's a good presentation. The answers in Genesis guys say that dinosaurs were on the ark?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and they talk about kinds, each according to his kind. Sure. And so it's like not like every single dinosaur, but like the genies. Let's see. Phylum, genus, species. Go back to my science. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, they make an argument that the dinosaurs were on the ark, and they actually had a lot of evidence that showed, like, trying to show the flood coming rapidly, and the dinosaurs, like, they do a pretty good job. It's a pretty compelling argument that they make there.
Do you think the answers in Genesis guys get everything right? I feel like our listeners could have the potential of going there and just saying, well, they must know, and just trusting them.
Here's what I would say. I would say they put forward a very compelling argument at the Creation Museum and at the Ark Encounter. Good, compelling argument. They use it as a gospel presentation, which I appreciate. Those guys are very passionate about it. I would say, use some discernment, measure it against God's word, ask God about it, but they do a really good job with their arguments.
Sure.
So, am I absolutely concerned they have everything right? No, I'm not positive they have everything right, but I don't know what's wrong.
Sure.
And on top of that, like, the only thing it was helpful to go, how much do I trust the Bible? How does this really, and it plays into the rest of the Bible. Right. But the only thing I would say is don't get so wound up on one area of our theology. Mm-hmm. It's no different when people get so wound up on the end times that all they're ever doing is going to every future prophecy type conference, and they're forgetting that prophecy was also truth-telling back then, and a lot of that has been fulfilled in Christ. And don't get so hung up in one area. Or soteriology, and the guys who are like caged Calvinists, and so you got caged creationists. Like everything is about that. Like,
we should just, at least at the end of the day, just agree that God created everything.
Yeah,
and sort out the rest.
But I will say, if you get a chance, and they don't sponsor the podcast at all, but it's a pretty good experience. I've gone a couple of times. It's really good.
I haven't gone. I'd like to go.
I mean, I got a little boat here on my shelf. A boat. I've got an ark on my shelf that's made from. It's like a little cool deal.
Young Earth, Old Earth.
Well, I just told you that if I think it's a literal 7 days and all this stuff, then that puts me in the Young Earth camp. Sure, I'm not crazy about it.
Sure.
Like, I'm not gonna. I mean, these things are things I hold pretty loosely. Yeah.
Well, if it's a young Earth and not an old Earth, then did trees in creation have rings? Did Adam have a belly button?
Yeah, there's so many.
The belly button question.
The big belly button question. Okay, I'm going to start with the rings question. And you got it. So you didn't answer young Earth, old Earth. You're saying?
Oh yeah, young Earth.
Young Earth.
Hello.
Okay. So the ring question. This is how I'd approach that landmine. I would say that God created a world that shows evidence of maturity.
Sure.
Okay, so the proof I would use to that, the only proof I can use to that, I suppose, for sure, is that he created an adult male. He did not create a baby male or an embryo male. Sure. He created an adult that would have evidence of having gone through puberty, having grown up, right? So if he created a person with the evidence of age, could he have created an earth with the evidence of age? So that's why I don't have a problem with when we do Geiger counter stuff and we measure this or we find this out or that out, that Earth seems old. And then if that's the case, if it's showing, let's say he just made a tree and it wasn't a seedling that took forever to grow, it was a tree.
Right.
Well, could that tree have had rings like every other tree that would grow up over time? Sure, I'm okay with that. The belly button question is interesting because that would suggest that Adam had an umbilical cord that got clipped, and then he has an innie or an outie or none. So, none of this really matters in the big scheme of theology.
It does matter.
But I've heard stories of people getting really wound up about this. But maybe God created him with the evidence of having the umbilical cord clipped. I'd be totally okay with that.
Sure.
Maybe he didn't. I'd be totally okay with that. But think about it for the kids. So Adam and Eve have no belly buttons, and the kids have a belly button. They're like, what? It's like a dimple when the parents are at dimples or whatever.
Sure. Well, I'm going to be pro tree ring and anti belly button.
Okay.
Don't think there was a belly button.
That's your take on it.
That's my take.
All right.
For what it's worth.
Landmine City.
There's
a lot of landmines.
Speaking of landmines, or maybe things we don't really think about, were there two creation accounts?
Oh, that's actually a really good academic.
So I never thought about this till I went to seminary. Thank you, seminary. And I had an Old Testament professor, Dr. Greg Watson. I'm sure he's listening to the podcast.
Oh, yeah, of course he is.
But for my Old Testament class, I thought we were just going to look through the whole Testament. But we spent like 4 weeks talking about the creation account in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2.
This is for your like, survey of Old Testament, really drilled in.
But he really drilled in and said, where is the break? And is there a break here in the pericopes? Most Bibles put a pericope break at 2 verse 4. Where it says, these are the records of the heavens and the earth concerning their creation, blah, blah, blah. And so he's saying, is this a continuation of the creation account in verse 1, or is this a separate account? Kind of that old earth, young earth, or kind of,
Well, so I think it's
gap theory type of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's that. I don't know where Dr. Watson stands on that. And he'll probably, I'm sure he's not listening, but Dr. Watson, if you're listening, reach out and
we'd love to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, we'll interview you on the podcast. He's not listening. Anyway, I see this a little bit like I see John chapter 1, verses 1 through 18, the beginning. Okay. What you have in John chapter 1, if you just hit pause for a second and realize you have the 30,000-foot overview given at the opening. And it's basically like the prolegomena or the introduction. These are the things we're going to see, and then you see all of that stuff play out as you go through John. So, like, here's a discussion about, just all, and so all that starts to play out. Here's Jesus, here's this. But then when you get to verse 19, then it picks up in the story.
Sure.
It says, okay, now the introduction is over. I think that Genesis 1 is not an introduction, but it's a, hey, where did all this stuff come from?
Right.
And the focus is on God.
Yeah.
God said this, do this is what God did. And then he made man in our image, and he gave some time to it. But then, to help continue out in this story, because the Bible is not a book only all about God.
Sure.
It's a book about the relationship between God and man, and eventually, quickly, it becomes the broken relationship between God and man.
Yes.
Then the entire story is the God redeeming the relationship, restoring it, redeeming it, rebuilding it through all that God does. And it's a relationship between God and man, all the way to the very end, where in the very end of Revelation, it's the relationship between God and man, beautifully restored, better than how it started.
Yeah.
All to God's glory. So this isn't just a book about God, it's a book about God and man. You get to chapter 2, and I think the first part probably falls in, I think the chapter doesn't start in the right spot. But I would say either including verse 4 or after verse 4, probably starting at verse 4, I think now is going to say, okay, we're going to drill down more and tell you about the other character in the story, humanity.
Right.
Okay, the first one's about God, and he created all this stuff. The second part's about humanity, and the story just then picks up from there.
What I love is, we've talked on the podcast before how at our church we use the Christian Standard Bible. But when I was working through this assignment, I saw that the English Standard Version actually separated chapter 2, verses 1 through 3 as its own pericope, talking about the Sabbath.
Oh,
I know that in the original translations, we didn't have verse numbers and pericopes and all that stuff, but it really helped draw my attention to the Sabbath and the importance of the Sabbath.
So you're saying like the publisher put a little heading over that.
Yeah.
Which, again, not inspired, but that is helpful.
But I think you're right. It's a continuation. It's not that there's 2 creation accounts, but you see kind of a shifting of gears here out of the creation of the world and creation on mankind and man's role, because that's what we go into: the temptation, the fall, sin's consequences, and so forth.
The first 2 chapters are really this big setup for the inciting incident, the conflict in the fall. That's the reason for the whole story moving forward. Right, the whole thing. So no, I don't think it's 2 creation accounts. What else you got on your list? How are we doing, man? This is a high-speed podcast.
Speaking of creation,
and God's getting hot.
God's view of creation.
Wait, do you think it's 2 accounts?
No, I think it's a continuation, and it's a shifting of gears.
I'm just putting you on the record here.
No, I know. That's what's great about asking the questions. I'm trying to but creation now. Speaking of creation, did God's view of creation change after the fall? Do you think the fall happened and God was like, I messed up, man?
That's the Wayne Grudem question. I know where that comes from. That's Wayne Grudem's question. That is
one of the discussion questions in the back of chapter 4.
You're like, what's up with this question?
Yeah.
Because I'm going through a systematic theology class. So I think his view was, first of all, I think it's not right to say that his view was everything before the fall was good and everything after the fall was bad.
But that's what it says.
No. No, come on.
It says I created this and it was good. I created that and it was good.
You know better. You had a class with Dr. Watson, and I know Dr. Watson taught you better than that. So it says, when we actually read it, it says he created this and it was good, and he created that and it was good. And it goes through, he sees each day at the end of the day, and he saw that it was good. Then he creates Adam, and he says it's very good. And then, I'm looking for the line here, when he creates Eve. Let's see, where is that? Where he says, the Lord, it's in chapter 2, right?
I think so. I'm trying to find it too.
I'm skimming. When he sees that man, he said it is not, oh, here it is, verse 18. Chapter 2, verse 18. Then the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper corresponding to him, and that's when we get to the discussion of how Eve was created. Mm-hmm. So, God saw in chapter 2 that something was not good.
Right.
And that then caused him to create Eve as a helper. And then by the way, he's like naming all the creatures and looking for the suitable helper. And so the view that God had at the beginning was, wow, this is good. It's an assessment. Sure. Yeah. But man being alone is not good. Yeah. And then the view that he had of creation after the fall is that he now sees, so all of creation was cursed in the fall. We read about that in chapter 3. So now when God sees creation, he also has to see with it the curse and sin, the rejection. But that doesn't mean that the man has lost the image of God, although it's tarnished, because in Genesis 5:3, when Adam has a child, he now has a child in his own image, right? So now it's a tarnished image that includes this rejection piece that then God is redeeming. Right. So I think when God looks at creation before the fall, he doesn't see the curse and sin. Okay. When he looks at the creation after the fall, he does see the curse and the sin, and he sees that on us. But when he looks at us, if we're redeemed by Christ's blood, he sees the righteousness of his Son, and now he's not seeing that sin. Yeah. Good, bad might be too black and white. Sure. And so I think if we get to the details of what God's seeing, I think that's helpful.
He sees the different aspects of creation.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that he was necessarily disappointed. Or
I think disappointed is probably a fair descriptor, but I don't think when he looks at creation now, he says everything in creation is all bad. Right. And I think sometimes we understand the concept of total depravity when we get to soteriology, meaning, everything is the worst it can possibly be at all costs, and everything is horrible, and we're the most wretched of all time. And that's not what total depravity means. It doesn't mean that we are the worst possible humans we could possibly be. Right. It means we have the absolute inability to save ourselves.
So, along those lines then, kind of creation related, did God preordain the fall?
Oh, I kind of opened that up. I'll say it this way, because I don't know. That's a tough question. Did he... So your question
is... Did he plan for man to mess up? Was that part of the plan?
I'll say this much for sure. I'll say this much with certainty. There's no way that surprised him.
Sure.
Which means even before he ever created anything, he adamantly knew that was going to happen. Yeah. Otherwise, there was stuff he didn't know. Right. So the question is, did he design it in there? Right. That's a complicated, really big mental, get your head around, twisted situation. But for sure I know that he knew it was going to happen. He created the world. He knew it was going to happen
before he created the world, right?
And he knew before.
So it's like, I knew it was going to happen, and I created the world anyway.
All Jesus, the cross, redemption, all of it was in God's mind before he laid the foundation of the world. So that then leads us to, did God create evil?
Right.
Right? Well, wait a minute. Did he create evil? A big philosophical, complex issue. How do we deal with the problem of evil? I think it was Sproul. Lots of people have said this, but the problem of evil is often said to be the Achilles heel of the Christian faith. It's just this tough deal.
Sure.
And so I would say it this way. Evil is a description of an action.
Right.
So it's a adjective, maybe. It's not a tangible thing. It's a description of a thing. So the thing is rejection of God.
Yeah.
And God didn't create rejection of God. You could say maybe he allowed rejection of God, certainly. So then this is a description word for rejection of God. So everything out in the world, it falls in that category in some way. Now, there's other kinds of evil that people would say, like natural catastrophes. right? That wouldn't be like rejection of God, but a result of the fall. Did God create that? Did God? And people really have to wrestle through this. I'm not trying to dance around it. I don't find anywhere where God is the responsible party for the fall.
Right.
But it didn't surprise him. It brings him more glory. And so we have to be okay with it in some way on that front.
Yeah.
Right? Tricky, right?
It's tricky.
How about you? I noticed you haven't answered this.
No, I feel the same way. You know, I think part of creation, part of having going through that rightly is there has to be the avenue, right? There has to be room for that to happen. Mm-hmm. So I think it was definitely part of the plan, like you said.
But okay, so people go, wait a minute, get all wound up about it. They want people. There are sometimes people will want to say, well, they want to either get God off the hook or put God on the hook on all the stuff in the past. But then when it comes to all the stuff in the future, they want 100% absolute certainty. God, Satan doesn't have power. This thing. And like, you know what? You kind of can't have both. Either God is completely sovereign, or God is not. Right? So you want him sovereign in the future, but you're not so sure about his sovereignty in the past. Hold the phone. It's the same in both.
So I'm going to go with God is sovereign, and he had the whole thing rigged. He had a plan in place. So
what other landmines have we not covered?
I think that's it.
I
think those are the big ones.
This one's a good one. The I think it's called The Moses Controversy is the documentary.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the reality that sometimes we forget that some things are still being created.
Yeah.
In that particular film, they said God
that's a movie
gave
documentary.
The Exodus, the Moses Controversy. It's the second one.
Yeah.
I think there's a third one now. Anyway, I went and saw that with Jared Jenkins, and we were both just enamored by this idea that like God created an alphabet for Moses to use so that he could actually start writing differently than using all of the little pictures like the Egyptian alphabet.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Right.
How did that get written in Hebrew when he left Egypt? Like God
there was no Hebrew.
Here's some creation, here's this, and here that's fascinating. Fascinating stuff.
That's awesome.
I think these are the landmines
Those
in
are
the
big
creation
ones,
account.
for sure.
I'm trying to think of some others.
If we're missing, send us an email. Let us know what we missed.
You can't. So people have let me know you can't email us because we don't ever give an email address. But you can use the communication form on SaltyBeliever.com.
Do we have an email address?
Not really. I don't know.
But we have a communication form.
Yeah, and that sends an email, so that probably has an email address, but I don't know it.
So if you found one, go to our website, fill out the form.
SaltyBeliever.com. Fill out the form. What landmines are we missing? And you know what? Somebody's going to hear the podcast and they're going to go all bent out of shape. Oh, what, blah, 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 blah. That's what we want to hear. Go ahead and just feed us that so we know where are these landmines that we can see and talk about.
Then we'll cover that in another episode.
Maybe we should solicit emails.
I think we should.
Okay. What are the theological landmines? What are the topics we're covering? Do we have an outline? What are the theological landmines, the things you get wound up about, that you debate with your friends about, that you disagree with in theology, or that you
Coming up, we're going to talk about prayer. We're going to talk about angels, Satan, and demons. We're going to talk about what is man, what is sin.
Okay.
Those are some heady topics.
Ooh, Satan and demons. There's got to be some landmines there, right?
I'm thinking.
Ooh, we've talked about that. Binding up Satan or doing this or doing that. Is Satan all powerful? Could he read thoughts? Oh, there's so much there.
Angel languages.
What else is... tongues?
Yeah.
Miraculous gifts?
Yeah.
Are all the gifts miraculous or just some? Did some cease? Did some not? This is going to be spicy.
Who is Christ? Was he just a nice guy, or is he the Savior, the Messiah?
Nice.
That kind of stuff. Atonement, resurrection.
Ooh.
Election.
Yeah. Calvinism, Arminianism. Or semi-Pelagianism.
Justification and adoption.
Oh, yeah, this is good stuff.
We got some good stuff coming.
So there's debates. I mean, I should pull out the... I'm trying to think who... John Piper and... I'm trying to think who these two guys were debating. N.T. Wright were debating justification.
Oh, yeah.
So this stuff happens. I mean, they had two different opinions. We've got the church stuff coming up, baptizing babies. We need to get baptism. We need to get a Presbyterian on with us to talk about baptizing babies, not baptizing babies, mode of baptism. Yeah. These are the landmines in systematic theology that we sometimes dance around. End times. Oh, send us all your end times.
Yeah.
Prophetic issues. I hope we just get bombarded with stuff.
It'd be nice.
It would be helpful to know what the landmines really are. We have a good idea, but maybe there's some things we hadn't heard.
We miss.
What are your favorite, like, these are the things you debate with your friends.
Yeah.
These are the arguments. Or maybe these are just the questions. I don't know if we can answer them or not, but we'll at least say there's a landmine.
Try to figure it out.
Tread lightly.
So go to SaltyBeliever.com, let us know, and hopefully you enjoy this podcast. Until next time.
Thank you for listening. Find more information at SaltyBeliever.com.